I've heard several mention of PTAC. So PTAC is Colorado Procurement Technical Assistance Corporation. They're really there to train individuals to or companies how to bid on government contracts. They co-locate with SBDC, which is a real unique model. And our executive director of PTAC, which, it's a Colorado-based organization, but we're lucky to have Colorado PTAC based here in Colorado Springs. Dennis Casey is the executive director. So you were talking and I was introducing you. So another plug for Colorado Springs. Thank you, Stephanie. Again, that was a great presentation. We have next our local economic guru, right? TATIANA Bailey. She has her master's in economics and her doctorate in public health from the Wolverines. From the University of Michigan. In the healthcare arena, she's focused on programs that aim to increase access and quality while reducing costs, particularly for at-risk populations. She also presents to audiences who wish to be better informed about the general framework of the healthcare system. If there's anything more confusing to me, and that's the framework of the healthcare system. She does a great job explaining that complex system. In the economic development field, she's focused upon the economic growth initiatives primarily through the venues of workforce readiness and entrepreneurship, another strength of Colorado Springs. Currently, she's director of the UCCS Economic Forum within the UCCS College of Business and serves as economic development resource to local businesses and government. She aims to inform audiences about our national and local economy, which she's doing here today, and participate in initiatives that leverage the region's many assets, which I try to bring up. So, with no further ado, TATIANA Bailey. Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I am a Michigan Wolverine, but since Harbaugh has underperformed this year, let's talk about where I'm actually from. Birth. I'm from Washington, D.C., Washington Caps, home of the Washington Caps. I absolutely love hockey, probably introduced to me by my husband, who's Canadian. And in my next life, I've decided that I'm going to be 6'4", I'm going to be Russian, I'm going to be really mean, and I'm not going to be afraid of ice. So there we go. So, as you know, I usually have a lot of information. I'm going to move through it fairly quickly. Some things have already been talked about. But really, it's not my sort of normal presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit more about small business. But as you know, I always start with a joke. Corny small business jokes. This one's about survival. Eat here or both of us will starve. With respect to inventory, I don't get it. Every time I try to take inventory, I nod off, says the shepherd. Oh, groaner, right? And conflict of interest. Take a look at the guy's head. I'm afraid I can't treat you, Mr. Fisk. I think there's a conflict of interest, says the dog to the fire hydrant. Sorry. So I'm going to talk about small business is the primary driver of economic growth, small business in Colorado, and then a little bit on local. So small businesses are ones with, as we know, less than 500 employees. Just to make a distinction when I'm talking about the data, firms are a business that can have many locations. Establishments are distinct physical locations, and that's why sometimes the numbers look so different. So firms are sort of like the umbrella organization, and establishments are, each little mom and pop shop, if you want to think of it that way. In 2016, there were almost 8 million employer establishments, businesses that had employees. Approximately 30 million establishments when you include self-employed. So there you can see the huge difference. Employer establishments with fewer than 500 workers accounted for 99.7% of all businesses, number-wise. Employer establishments with fewer than 20 workers made up 85%. So to me, that's the one that's really impressive. Those are very small businesses, but they're still making up, really the backbone of the U.S. economy. 8 of the 30 million establishments are minority-owned, and 11 million are women-owned. And just so you can see here, the different percentages. So we have, men, we have minorities, we have women, and then, about 52% are mostly white dudes. So here you can see new jobs. Businesses, small business in the U.S. has really been the primary driver of new jobs for a very long time. So if you look here, firms with fewer than employees accounted for 22% of the new jobs in the roughly 10-year period from March 2007 to September 2017. Firms with 50 to 249 employees accounted for 30% of the new jobs. So really, it's about a 50-50 split, which is incredibly impressive. Because remember, most businesses are fewer than 20 employees, and yet look at how many new jobs they're adding, right? For them to add a new job is much more sort of impactful and impressive as opposed to a firm that has, 1,000 or 2,000 employees. Small business created 1.9 million of the new jobs in 2015, latest data available. Out of the 3.1 million total new jobs, so 61% total, firms employing fewer than 20 experienced the largest gains. So this momentum is still in place. They added 1.1 million jobs. The smallest gains were from firms employing 100 to 499. And really, this amounts to 1 in 2 workers in the private workforce either running or working for a small business. And then just to give you sort of a picture of this composition of small business, 30.2 million small businesses, and look at that, 24.3 million are 1099s. Ekta asked me to talk about 1099s today, and I'm glad she did because the more I dug, the more I realized that self-employed is really, really increasing here, in Colorado and in the US. And then the other 5.9 million are the 1 to 499 employees, and then of course a subset of that is the largest component, the 5.3 million for the 1 to 20. And then here you can see for employer establishments, this is a really cool resource that I came across. This is the National Small Business Association report. They do a large survey. The last one was about 1,600 representative businesses across the U.S. And they do these surveys twice a year and ask a lot of really insightful questions, I think. So you can see here, most small businesses that have employees have 0 to 5, okay? So, and actually the 1 to 5 there is, roughly 46%. Most of these small businesses are S-corps or LLCs. Most have gross sales or revenue of less than 100,000 or between 1 and 5 million. So you can see the bar chart over there on the bottom right. So that's kind of an interesting distribution. So very small or that 1 to 5 million range. Small businesses reach across many sectors. Ekta's alliance with manufacturing makes a lot of sense when you look at this. Manufacturing is actually the industry with the highest proportion of small businesses. And then you can see professional is number 2, and that's a lot of your private consultants and so forth. And then I will make these slides available if you're interested in looking at some of these other categories. When businesses are asked what their biggest challenges are, it's really quite varied, but I found this one particularly interesting. Number 1 concern, healthcare costs. And that is not necessarily surprising, and that's something that's actually been true for a very long time. I know even back when I was in graduate school, that was true. And then some of the other things here as well that you can see. And lack of qualified workers was number 3, by the way. And the lion's share of small businesses feeling very confident right now, 72%. And the fine print on this one said that this is the second highest confidence since they've been doing this survey. And, of course, it's because most of them are experiencing growth. If you look at the most recent survey of December 2017, 53% of the businesses said that they were experiencing growth. And then if you look at the bottom right, 66% say they expect to have growth moving forward in the next 12 months. And that is, in fact, now 2018. Most expect to hire in 2018, although the percentage is a little bit lower than 2016. So it's flattened out a little bit, but it's still a very high percentage, 38% of them looking to hire. And anyone who tracks this, yesterday the latest unemployment numbers came out. We went from 3.9 down to 3.6 in the US. So this is highly indicative. And I'm not going to talk about this today, but that usually does signal we're late in a cycle because we're going to continue to have wage push inflation, right, as salaries go up. Most expect to pay their employees more, here you go, in 2018. So the percentage increase is 1 to 2% and 3 to 4% make up the lion's share of the respondents. And most provide some kind of additional training. And this isn't necessarily surprising either, because we know we have a skills gap, but also employers are willing to do it because times are good, and of course because they know that they need it. 82% of them saying they provide some kind of training. And most employees in small businesses stay 8+ years, which is really, really impressive. Much, much higher than large businesses, 37% of them saying they stay 8 years or more. And most say they can obtain adequate financing, and they use, most of them, earnings from their own business, so they channel it back in, 32%, credit cards, 31%, large bank loans, 15%, community banks, 14%, and so forth. But 73% of them are saying right now that they can get the credit that they need, the money that they need to infuse into their business. Now, just stepping back and looking at some facts about small business owners, the median income for a self-employed person with an incorporated business was about $50,000 in 2016. 5.7 million loans were made, under 100,000 in that smaller range, but they were valued at $82.6 billion. And this is under the Community Reinvestment Act. Of course, these smaller loans are the primary financing mechanism for these smaller businesses. And 64% of small business owners actually start with $10,000 or less, which is impressive. Big banks approved about 24% of all small business loans. Smaller banks have a much higher approval rating, around 49%. I don't know what you want to do about that, Bruce, but that's a little skewed there. I don't know. Alternate lenders approved 58% of loan requests, and the average SBA 7A loan was about $372,000, and the maximum for those loans is $5 million. But they vary quite a bit. What do business owners want from government? The number one thing is to end the partisan gridlock, and then you can see some of the other things that are up here as well. It's really quite interesting to look at because past surveys have revealed that they're very good at sort of voting in that direction. Now, a little bit about Colorado. So here is the latest that just came out for 2017, and I mean, Colorado absolutely killed it this past year. 2014 was a really good year, and then so was 2017. You can see Colorado is one of the darker blue states. We were number 2 in the nation for GSP growth, gross state product. That's total output. We were only outperformed by Washington, but I know. It is. It's an exciting time to be here. And Washington did have a higher percentage, but I don't want to live there, so let's not go into any details. So here you can see GDP, GSP, the red line, and GMP for our city, the blue line. And you can see that Colorado, as I mentioned, 2014, wow, look at that red line. That's where we really took off and started to outperform the nation. But interestingly, look at GMP, look at our city. We were a little later to the game, but we are consistently now higher than both Colorado and the US in terms of our annual growth rate, which is really impressive. The projections for GSP for the state are a little bit lower, but we still have really strong leading indicators. These are things like new business formation, which Stephanie talked about, high-tech sector growth. The cities in the states that are doing really well tend to have a lot in technology, because that is the future, high job postings, and some recovery in the oil and gas industry for us. And this just shows how the leading indicator, which is the dotted red line, is a very good predictor of what actually happens in the economy in the state. And as you can see, we're ticking up. And then here you can see these new entity filings. As I said, 2014 was a big year, but look at how we're still, at that 6-7% growth rate for new businesses, right? And that's all about small business. And as Stephanie said, that's your pipeline for businesses that become 20, 50 employees and such. In Q1, the most recent data for 2018, we had a 7% increase in new entities, 6% increase in entity. So a lot of them are, surviving, and 13% in good standing. And then, of course, if you have a lot of new business, you're going to have employment growth. So you can see the line there shows the tight correlation between employment and new entity filings. So a lot of what's driving our growth is this entrepreneurship, is this small business growth. And then here you can just see new technology businesses forming. This same map 5 years ago did not include El Paso County. So that tells you something about the sectors that are doing well. In 2016, there were 165,000 employer establishments. These are not self-employed, but 600 and almost 12,000 businesses, including the self-employed. So we actually have 78.6 of small businesses were self-employed people. Now that's a little bit lower, 2% lower than the US, but if you flip it and you look at the bottom bullet, businesses with fewer than 20 workers made up 87% of all businesses, and this is 2% higher than the US. So we may not have quite as many self-employed, but we have a larger proportion of small businesses. And then to talk just for a second about entrepreneurship, most people who track this look at the Kauffman Index, and that is sort of the think tank for entrepreneurship in the United States. The 2017 report showed that we ranked number 8, number 5, and number 4 in their key categories, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So here, the average startup, you can see again, we're one of the favorable large states, and this is the rate of startup growth. So this is basically saying that the average startup grew 74% in 5 years, and that was the number 8 ranking. Okay, so the average startup went from 5 to 9 businesses if they were still in business 5 years later. This one says 350 out of 100,000 adults become entrepreneurs in the state of Colorado, and that's the one where we ranked 5th. And then here, 8.56 of every 100,000 adults own a business in the state of Colorado, and that one we ranked 4th. So this is a large explanatory picture in terms of why the state of Colorado is doing so well. And of course, business climate has a lot to do with it as well. Businesses are not going to decide to open or stay here unless the business climate is favorable. So you can see here that the greener states, including Colorado, have a lower business tax index, which of course implies a better system. And a lot of that is because our top personal income tax rate, the state portion only, is about middle of the road to the lowish side. And that's important, of course, because about 94% of businesses are pass-throughs. So if the state portion of the income tax is low, that's one of the things that feeds into that business tax index. In terms of one of the rankings that's out there, you can see Colorado ranked 6th in the nation for being a state favorable for business. And, so many of these, quality of life, workforce are we're in the top 10. I only underlined the ones that were not doing so well, not to highlight the negative, but to just say these are some of the things that we could work on. Things like infrastructure, cost of living, and so forth. And then, of course, this all ties together into where are we in terms of unemployment. As I mentioned, in May, we went down a little bit, but to keep it comparable to the state, I kept up the April numbers, 3.7% unemployment in the U.S., which is phenomenally low, well below the natural rate of unemployment. But Colorado's was 2.6%, way below. So, of course, we know that a lot of employers are having trouble finding qualified workforce, including ICTA, looking for an intern. I do have a son who's looking for a job, okay? Now, most of the growth that we've seen in the state of Colorado is, of course, across the Front Range. About 88% of the jobs created statewide in 2017 were along the Front Range. El Paso County added 6,300 jobs, Teller 140 jobs, and I'll talk more about that in a second. In 2015, we had about 76,000 new jobs. About 52,000 of those were from small business, so a large percentage, 69%. And remember that new jobs from small business in the U.S. was only 61%. So Colorado's growth, again, is much fueled by these small businesses. And then these are your largest sectors by employment in the state of Colorado: health and social assistance, accommodation and food, because mostly tourism, retail, trade, education, professional and technical, and construction. And you can see that in 2017, all of these had significant growth. That's just an annual growth rate there. And then we have 12 sectors across the state of Colorado that experience somewhere between 2 and almost 9% growth rate in 1 year. I just redid this graph, and before it used to say between 2 and 6% growth. So it's pretty phenomenal that we have the growth that we do in these in that many different industries. Then, a little bit of bad news. It seems like a good problem to have such a low unemployment rate, but you can see here, even just comparing February to April, these are the job postings compared to the people looking for work. So basically, if you look at statewide, the most recent data, 0.64, this is basically telling us that for every open job, we only have 0.64 people. Okay, and then look at how that went down statewide from February to April, and then look at Colorado Springs. I mean, I actually had my data person go back and look at this again because I couldn't believe that this was true. Incredibly tight labor market. And then just a little bit about Colorado Springs. We are not an anomaly in the state. We are largely driving the state along with northern Colorado. You can see the Front Range. These are the MSAs, the cities that had the highest GMP growth year to year. And so from 2016 to 2017. So we experienced inflation adjusted a 3.5% increase. The US on average for all cities was 1.7%. So we were about double. And then the two cities in Colorado that did the best were Colorado Springs and Fort Collins. I haven't been to Fort Collins, but I heard it's flat, right? Yeah, okay. Just saying. So the unemployment rate here, you can see the U.S. and you can see Colorado, but here you can also see Pueblo and Teller and El Paso counties, and the little arrow just shows that our unemployment rate here locally fell below the state around 2014, 2015, and that's really when we started to take off. In 2016, there were about 18,000 employer establishments, okay, so these are employer establishments in Colorado Springs, and about 51,000 self-employed. So a very high number there as well. Establishments with fewer than 500 workers, pretty much the same as the US, 99.8% of those establishments. And businesses with fewer than 20 workers made up about 87%. Again, we're pretty similar to the US. And then here are the sectors that are the largest sectors in Colorado Springs based upon employment. So you can see healthcare and social assistance and education, that's the number one. Number two is military, retail, trade, and so forth. The interesting thing is I looked at this from many years ago, and professional and technical services used to be way down the list, and it keeps it inching up each and every year. And then I also like to look at the businesses, the types of establishments by industry that have increased the most. So from 2006 to 2017, you can see that professional and technical services did indeed have a huge growth rate, as did healthcare and social assistance. Okay, so these are in terms of the number of businesses. And then Teller County had the largest increase in professional and technical, and the largest decrease in construction. Now, just to kind of understand this, the composition of small business, do we have more that are really small in Colorado Springs, middle-sized, larger? Well, if we look at the establishments, the businesses with 1 to 19 employees, Colorado Springs from 2000 to 2016 has had nice growth, as have these other areas. Correlated to that are going to be the employees that work there, also nice increase. But then look at establishments from 250 to almost 500 employees. Here you can see that Colorado Springs has really outperformed everyone. So that seems like this is the group that has experienced the most growth. And then, of course, in terms of employment, that's also true. So most of our business and employment growth has been in this 250 to 499 group. And then new jobs, 2015 and 2016, you can see we did really well in Colorado Springs. The dotted line shows that sort of equilibrium to be at the natural rate of unemployment. How many new jobs do we need? It's about 5,400. But you can see we did really well in 15 and 16. 17 numbers came in just about a month or so ago, and we still outperformed that 5,400. It's not quite as high, but remember that these are cumulative, right? We did really well over the past 2 years. Those jobs have not gone away, and the fact that we still have so many postings keeps me very optimistic. And then here are your top 10 job openings. It's really mostly IT and healthcare, which supports all the other historic data that we've been looking at. And then the box just shows that we have about 12,000 job openings in April, but only about 10,800 people looking for work. Now, one thing to pay attention to as business owners, as employers, and as economic development people is that one thing that is can be a hindrance for us is that our wages are low. In El Paso County. This is a legacy. This is something that we've had for a very long time. We've had some quarters where we've outpaced the nation in terms of wage appreciation, but not enough. We've got a bit of ground to make up because if you compare us to Colorado, we're 13% lower than Colorado for average salaries, and we're about 9% lower than the US, right? Because in Colorado, wages are a little bit higher. Now, on your tables, you see the stanchions that have the workforce asset map. AICTA, Dana, and I, with also the Chamber and EDC, the county, and several other entities. If you haven't heard about WHAM already, I encourage you to get on wham.uccs.edu. This was a community initiative that we took upon ourselves to say, we need a one-stop place where we can organize everything workforce-related that's really easy to use to help with this skills gap. Sort of the next step in this, Yemi and from the Chamber and Pikes Peak Community College, UCCS, and the Forum are coming together to look at what are the big job openings, what are the top 10 job openings, and how many graduates do we have locally in those? I mean, it's, simple supply and demand. Economists really aren't very strong. We just subtract one from the other. But, it's such a simple exercise, but it's really important to do, and we are actually starting with IT and healthcare. And this is just what the homepage looks like. We made a superhero theme, and I have to give some credit to Deanne McCann and everyone else at the county and also the city, because it was AICTA, Dana, and I who walked into their offices to say, will you give us some money for this custom website? And I guess we outnumbered them. I don't know. It was all women, and we're bossy, but we got it. And it's live, and it's a really great resource that all of these wonderful people put together. And then if you didn't grab one on the way in, you can grab one on the way out. This is actually my monthly economic dashboard. Every small business should be a forum sponsor because this is really critical information. That was a joke. You don't really have to be a sponsor. But, this is just a 2-page monthly report that I send out with some narrative that includes a lot of the information that, in truth, all businesses, I think, have some interest in. And then lastly, if you do want me to talk about when the next economic downturn is, because it seems like that's the main question I get these days, the annual event coming up is going to be on October 4th at the Ent Center from 1 to 4, followed by a happy hour, sponsored happy hour this year. And we're going to have John Sylvia from Wells Fargo come in and do the national. I'll do the local, and then we're going to have Q&A with Mayor Suthers and various other community leaders at the end. That's it.